Territoriality definition and its uses. The American geographer Edward Sawyer defined territoriality as a behavioural phenomenon which, in connection with the organisation of space, forms different influential areas or clearly defined territories whose common characteristic is their social specifics. This definition defines the organisation of people in their states and nations as a consequence of their already pre-existing cultural, social and societal norms. This means that nations and states are a result of a like-minded and similar group of people coming together. Therefore, territoriality is the process in which territories are formed and which geographic areas are captured, controlled and maintained. Uses. Peter Taylor states that territoriality is more a construction of a social space than its direct perception. This relates to how territories are a result of their surroundings and not the other way around. Territoriality is usually compared to the carving of the earth into states and nations on the macro level. However, on the micro level, there is a constant production of territories through local political geographies. This micro level of territoriality shows how people have a persistent attachment to a specific territory, be it through nationalism, patriotism, or through another deeper connection to a certain territory. Key thinkers and approaches. In their books Territory, A Short Introduction, and Territories, The Claiming of Space, Delaney and Story lay out fundamental theories of claiming, asserting and maintaining territories through territoriality. They also state how territoriality is deeply embedded in social relations and that territories are a result of social practices and processes. Dowman expands on this theory in his article named Territory and Key Concepts of Political Geography, by exploring how the strategy of territoriality creates territories. He states that territoriality is the means in which political actors translate their control over territory into control over people, resources, and relationships. Our case study expands on this idea of political actors by showing how political leaders use the idea of territoriality to pursue a new territory and create a sense of urgency to reclaim a land they believe is their own. To recap, territoriality is seen by many political geographers as a process in which geographic space, people, and states are controlled. It is also seen as a way in which similar cultures, social norms, and relationships can be grouped together, and that territories, such as nations and states, are a result of this grouping. Something to think about. Until recent times, nations and states have clearly been defined with hard borders, walls, and border patrols. With the success of the European Union and the Schengen Agreement, borders were essentially abolished for all those living, working and travelling within the EU. Does this mean that those territories no longer have the same meaning as they did before? And does Brexit and Trumpism show that these changes are reversing?
The Crimean Peninsula has been an area of intense dispute for hundreds of years, primarily due to its strategic military location and wealth of natural resources. These issues have also been compounded by the region's complex cultural and ethnic history. The ethnic composition of the peninsula has seen significant variations throughout the last century. Various political events, such as the transfer of the region from the Russian Federation to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic in 1954, as well as its annexation by independent Ukraine in 1991, has caused the proportion of Ukrainian and Russian populations to fluctuate massively during these periods. In the years leading up to the events of 2014, ethnic Russians represented 64% of the population, while 23% were Ukrainians and 10% were Crimean Tatars. This ethnic split has meant that since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the concept of national identity within the Crimean population became very much based on ethnicity, with the Ukrainian and Russian populations campaigning for very different futures for the region. The Russian Party of Crimea were pushing for the revival of an ethnic Russian national identity and a privileged political position for Russians in Crimea, whereas Ukrainian parties were calling for the Ukrainianization of the peninsula and a closer tie to the European Union. The disagreements between these two parties resulted in a period of unrest and violence. these disputes within the population of the region became a central factor leading to the eventual annexation of the region. Ukraine attempted to claim the Crimean territory by arguing that the Ukrainian population holds a greater attachment to the land than the Russians, despite making up just 23% of the total Crimean population. The Russian government, however, had various motivations and territorial claims which led to the eventual annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. One of the major motivations for the Russian government was the significance of the multitude of naval bases which are positioned along the coast of the Crimean Peninsula. These docks formed the base for the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which was an essential force for controlling their territories held in the Black Sea. Another key motivating factor for the Russians' actions was the potential to control the largely untapped gas and oil reserves in the Black Sea region. Acquiring this natural resource potential would ensure Ukraine's dependence on Russia to meet its energy needs. Figure 1 shows the extent to which Russia's territorial claims in the Black Sea have extended after the annexation. The Russian government used the media to push a discourse of collective Russian identity across borders in order to justify its military actions, stating that they had an obligation to protect the Russian people from the unrest in Crimea. In March 2014, Valentina Matvienko, the chairman of Russia's Federal Council, consolidated this discourse, stating that Russia had every reason, responsibility and obligation to act and protect the Russian-speaking population of Crimea, whose lives were in real danger. They used this discourse as a way to justify the occupation of the Crimean territory by armed troops and to perhaps distract from the true military, financial and political motivations involved in the move to annex the Crimean Peninsula.
The annexation of Crimea was largely possible in the way that it was done because of the loose ideas around what territory Crimea was. When Soja describes territories as defined space containing a singular culture or social group, this implies that an area without a singular culture or social group are disputed. Following this, it makes it easier for insurgencies to be embedded, as Russia can claim the famous Little Green Men are ethnic Russians in a territory that do not belong to any particular culture. Delaney describes the principle of territorial integrity as the absence of territorial violation. The writing then goes on to describe that in cases of invasion and occupation, territory is not working as it is supposed to. This can clearly be linked to Crimea, where there is a territory that has been taken control of by an outside nation-state. The writing then goes on to talk about the seizing of contested space as being closely tied to the denial of other claims to that space, meaning that Russia have turned on what was an ethnically and socially diverse region into a particularly Russian one and denying the other groups from claiming the peninsula. With regards to claiming territories, Story mentions spheres of influence. This is an idea that there was a large aspect of the Cold War that can also be linked to that of Russia and Crimea. The territory in Crimea does not only create a sphere of influence in that part of Europe, but the port allows Russia to project more influence through naval manoeuvres and shipping throughout the wider part of the world for more of the year than previously allowed. With a particular strength from the Black Sea and more into the Mediterranean, as well as access to the Suez Canal. The idea of a sphere of influence means that whilst a nation may not have a certain territory or be within their borders, they can have influence over other areas and gain this influence in a number of manners, from invasion to being allies. The stronger the influence, the less relevant borders of the territory are.